In 1985, everything changed for DC Comics as the comic event Years in the Making was released. The Crisis on Infinite Earths not only changed the landscape of DC Comics' timeline, but also the landscape of not just the comic industry, but the pop culture industry as well, and its presence can still be felt to this day. In this two-part series, I shall dive into the book's risky conception, how the massive story was plotted and undertaken, and its place in modern pop culture. This is The Crisis of Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths began in the back pages of the new Teen Titans issue 21, where the shadowy being known as the Monitor was first revealed. The event formally began in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 1, naturally, where the idea of a multiverse is explained and how the primary DC continuity is referred to as Earth 1. The person who catalogs and records the histories of these realities and worlds is the Monitor, a being from the beginning of time. The Monitor's evil counterpart, the Anti-Monitor from the Antimatter universe, begins to destroy many of the realities Monitor oversees with a huge wave of antimatter, intent on becoming the one and only ruler of the realities. The Monitor plans on battling his evil counterpart, but requires heroes from across time and space to aid in him setting up 5 towers, which will combine the multiverse into one reality, making it stronger and able to combat the wave of death heading their way. After being betrayed by the Anti-Monitor possessed Harbinger, Monitor is killed, but the power his death releases is enough to protect the last 5 parallel Earths, putting them into a limbo away from the Anti-Monitor. Angered at his brother's actions, Anti-Monitor recruits the Psycho Pirate, imbuing him with some of his power and using him to manipulate the heroes of Earth 4, Earth S, and Earth X to attack the remaining 2 Earths. However, his plan ultimately fails when the Earths enter the limbo, freeing them from his power. Harbinger, now free from the Anti-Monitor's control, recruits heroes from the remaining Earths to lead the battle against the Anti-Monitor in the Antimatter universe. Using Alexander Luthor Jr. of Earth 3's power to manipulate matter to enter the Wasteland. Pariah, a great scientist from a world destroyed by the Anti-Monitor, tracks the villain to his citadel, letting the heroes destroy one of his converter devices, which Anti-Monitor was to use to destroy the remaining Earths. In the battle, Supergirl is killed while holding the injured Anti-Monitor at bay, letting her friends escape. Taking advantage of the war, villains of the universes unite under Brainiac, who kills Alexei Luthor of Earth 2, while the Anti-Monitor, grievously injured from his fight with Supergirl, rebuilds himself a new body, intending to use an antimatter cannon to break into Limbo and destroy the 5 Earths. The villain almost succeeds, but thanks to Barry Allen's noble sacrifice, his plan fails and his weapon is destroyed. Angered at the defeat, Anti-Monitor absorbs the power of millions of worlds, planning on traveling back through time to stop the creation of the entire universe. The Spectre, the spirit of vengeance, reunites with the heroes and villains, warning them of the villain's plans. So the heroes travel back in time to stop him, while the villains travel back in time to ancient Oa, preventing Krona from creating the tech necessary for the Anti-Monitor's future plan to happen. Krona, however, bests the villains and continues his work, meaning his time travel devices still exist. The Anti-Monitor waits for Alex Luthor to reopen the portal between the positive and antimatter universes, and in doing so he captures the heroes, but a magically empowered Spectre creates an energy overload, which shatters space and time itself. Because of this, the 5 Earths merge into a single shared universe, and the heroes return to the present, with only the heroes that traveled to the dawn of time remembering their original realities. A cosmically empowered Anti-Monitor attacks, transporting the new Earth to the Antimatter universe and summoning a horde of shadow demons. The heroes launch their carefully planned counterattack, culminating in a battle with Kal-El, the Earth 2 Superman, Alexander Luthor of Earth 3, and Superboy of Earth Prime. With the help of the new god's adversary Darkseid, they are able to beat the Anti-Monitor. In this final battle, the Anti-Monitor, reduced to a flaming head, crashes into a star and is killed by the Earth 2 Superman. As there are only 4 who remember the original past, Alex sends Earth 2 Superman, Earth 2 Lois Lane, Earth Prime Superboy, and himself into a pocket paradise dimension, leaving the heroes of the remaining Earth to sort out the aftermath of the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Despite relatively limited marketing and DC being unsure if this series would ever be successful, Crisis on Infinite Earths was a bestseller, seen as one of the best comic events ever written. Not all reviews were positive, however, with some citing the series being a messy and awkward textbook definition of style over substance. While it technically wasn't the first large-scale comic book crossover, Crisis on Infinite Earths is generally credited with popularizing the idea, paving the way for many of today's standout comic book events. The series' success inspired DC to begin a tradition of quote-unquote summer crossovers. Some of these include Invasion, Armageddon 2001, 0 Hour, Crisis in Time, and Identity Crisis, with many mentioning the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. The second part of one of DC's later crossovers, Convergence, from 2015, heavily references the series and sees some of DC's superheroes travel back to this era. The series had an immediate effect on DC as a universe, dividing the company's history into two eras, pre-Crisis and post-Crisis. Wolfman and Perez teamed again to produce the History of the DC Universe's limited series to summarize the DCU's new history. Many of the DC characters had their histories rebooted. Wonder Woman's comic was relaunched entirely by Perez, Len Wein, and Greg Potter. Superman was first re-envisioned in a limited series, The Man of Steel by John Byrne, while the Superman comic was retitled The Adventures of Superman to make way for a new Superman series. Batman was minimally affected by the reboot. His comic was not relaunched, however he was given an updated origin, courtesy of Frank Miller with Batman Year One. In addition, Wally West replaced Barry Allen as the Flash, as Barry had died during the Crisis. The Justice League's roster was changed, and characters DC acquired from other companies such as Fawcett Publications and Charlton Comics were integrated into the DC universe. The practice of re-envisioning characters in the new DCU lasted well into 1989, with properties such as Green Lantern, Black Orchid, Hawkman, and the Suicide Squad all being rebooted. The revamp raised sales to a huge 22% in that first year, and DC beat Marvel in direct market sales for the first time in August and September 1987, and The Man of Steel issue 1 from John Byrne was the best-selling comic issue of 1986. Crisis on Infinite Earths is the first installment in what would become later known by fans as the Crisis Trilogy. The second part of the trilogy, the 7-part series Infinite Crisis, was written by Jeff Johns and illustrated by Phil Jimenez, Perez, Ivan Rice, and Jerry Ordway. It was published in October 2005 to June 2006, with a number of tie-in issues that spun into it and out of it. In the series, Kal-El, Alexander Luthor Jr., and Superboy Prime escape the pocket dimension that they were left in at the end of the original series. Luthor, having gone insane, attempts to recreate the multiverse using the Anti-Monitor's corpse. Whereas Crisis on Infinite Earths discarded the DC multiverse, forming one universe, Infinite Crisis restored it. The conclusion of the trilogy, Final Crisis, began in May 2008 and ended in January 2009. The series was written by Grant Morrison, with art by J.G. Jones, Carlos Pacheco, Marco Rudy, and Doug Mankey. In Final Crisis, Darkseid arrives on Earth and begins a conquest to overthrow reality itself, as part of a plan by the villain Libra to conquer the entire multiverse. The Justice League and the Green Lantern Corps join forces in a desperate attempt to stop the upcoming onslaught. 2019 turned into a big year for Crisis on Infinite Earths, as the CW's Arrowverse adapted it as its annual crossover event. The events of Crisis have been hinted at throughout the different series of the Arrowverse, none more so than The Flash, which references the character's demise in it in the very first episode of the show. The world which the Crisis took place in made a return in the pages of Doomsday Clock issue 12, where it's revealed that an Earth called Earth 1985, a world that is set in the same year as the Crisis, exists now in the rebuilt multiverse, but has yet to be explored. Crisis on Infinite Earths had a resounding effect on comics, both in-universe and in reality, as it helped shape what modern comic book events are and what they could be like, and the effects of the landmark event are still felt to this very day. Thank you for joining me on this trip into Crisis on Infinite Earths.